Welcome to Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I'm Paul Dottino, he's Matt Citak, and we're going to be here for the next hour to talk Giants football with you. And oh my goodness, it is an important week. You know, folks, come Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, teams are going to have to get down to 53. That means 37 players who are currently on the NFL's 90-man rosters are going to be set free by each of the 32 teams. That's a lot of players that are going to be available for waiver claims or as street free agents. Now, we're not going to pretend to be Joe Shane or Brian Dable, but I think what we can do, Matt, during the course of this hour is talk about some of the positions and some of the bubble players. And you guys know that term from years ago. I don't know how many people use it now, but bubble players are guys who may be on the cusp of making the 53 or not making the 53. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion about that as we go into Saturday's preseason finale against the New York Jets in a game that may or may not decide the fate of a few bubble players.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know yet. Coach Dable didn't say if or how much the starters will play. We don't know if they're going to suit up.
It did not sound like it.
It didn't sound like it, and I know, Coach Dable said that the other team's plans doesn't have an effect on his, the Giants' plans, but Robert Saleh did say today that Aaron Rodgers and pretty much all the Jet starters will not be suiting up for the finale on Saturday. That combined with the fact that the starters did get a lot of good reps against the Jets in the joint practice yesterday, it does make me lean more towards the starters not playing come Saturday. And which, as you said, will be a great chance for a lot of those guys or all of those guys that are at the bottom of the depth chart at their respective positions to make one last strong case for themselves to make the roster. Because as you said, there's spots still up for grabs at numerous positions. Nothing is, solidified. Nothing is set in stone. This will be a big test and a big last opportunity for a lot of guys to showcase their skills for this coaching staff.
All right, well, let's go backwards a second on the bubble concept and go to the starting 22. I think the only spot for sure that's still open on the starting 22 is the cornerback 2 spot. I pretty much think they know who their starting 11 is going to be on offense and on defense against the Vikings as we sit here today. Would you agree?
Well, I guess the only other position I have somewhat of a question of is who's starting next to Dexter then? Is that going to be Nacho?
I think Nacho's the guy.
Okay.
I'd be surprised if it's not.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Okay.
Now,
then yeah.
Whoever
CB2.
the third defensive tackle is in the rotation, that could be debated.
Yeah.
But I think Nacho's going to start against Minnesota.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, so CB2, we're on the same page. CB2 is the one starting job that we really don't have a grip on because Cordell Flott has had 2 weeks of a quad issue.
Well, actually, there's one other position.
Do you?
But I guess somewhat of a different reason. The CB2 spot is a little unclear because, as you just said, Flott has been injured.
Right.
And McLeod, he's been given an opportunity, but, it's not like the last couple of days or the last 10 days he's gone above and beyond and blew Flott out the water where it's McLeod's job now.
Well, to be fair, let's just say Flott did not work today, so I don't think he's going to be in the game Saturday. That's not a stretch.
Yeah.
But if Flott comes back Monday, I guess they're going to have a light workout Monday, or are they not? Are they not going to work Monday? I'm not sure now. There is a practice Tuesday.
Yes.
Tuesday morning there's a practice. I don't know if that's a shells or a pad, but there is a practice on Tuesday. I guess what I'm saying is it's not out of the question for Flott to come back into practice next week and have a good week and a half and start against the Vikings. Now, that's not out of the question.
No,
and if
sure.
he doesn't, then McLeod's probably going to start.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess probably. I mean, as we know, there's still a little over 2 weeks until that week 1 game against the Vikings, and things can change between now and then.
Yeah.
It would be, I guess, a little surprising if they bring someone in, from the street or a waiver claim and throw them immediately into the starting lineup.
That would be shocking.
But the other position I was going to mention, but for a slightly different reason, I think, is just the second safety spot. It seems like Jason
up for grabs.
It seems like Jason Pinnock, has solidified himself as the starter. He's started every game until he got hurt last year, 16 games. I believe at this point, Newbin has potentially jumped Dane Belton as the, I guess, so-called starter. But my only point being that those two have been rotating. So while one guy is obviously will be on the field for that first snap in week 1, that doesn't go to say that that guy is the starting safety and will be getting the primary number of snaps. It seems like between Pinnock, Newbin, and Belton, there's going to be at least somewhat of a rotation. Do you disagree?
See, here's what I will say.
At least in week 1, I
think they love all 3 safeties.
Yes, for sure. That's why I said clear. It's a slightly different situation than the CB2.
I'll go with Bowen's comment from a week and a half ago when he said it's Belton's job to lose. Based on that comment, I don't think Belton has done anything to lose the job. Therefore, as the holdover and incumbent, I'm going to say he stays unless he blows it. And I think because Newbin missed time early in training camp, they're trying to give him more reps quickly, and that's why he's been sharing some of the snaps, because they're trying to get him coached up quickly, because in case they need him or in case they want to use 3 safety packages, they want to know he's ready. So I don't know if the extra snaps Newbin's gotten is necessarily a reflection that he has elevated the competition.
The only thing I'll say about that, and I've been steadfast.
And neither one of us know for sure because we haven't talked to Bowen this week.
No idea. And I've been steadfast that Dane Belton has had a good camp. It's not like he hasn't played well.
He's done nothing to lose it. Remember the terms that were used.
The one thing is when Bowen made that comment, that was like the very beginning of Newbin getting back fully into practice.
Right.
Fully being incorporated into the defense.
Agreed.
And as we've gotten further and further from when Bowen made that comment, we have seen Newbin take more and more snaps with the first team defense playing alongside Jason Pinnock. So that's why I'm just saying, I wouldn't confidently say one or the other is the starting safety next to Jason Pinnock. I wouldn't be surprised if either one started week 1, and I expect both of them to play pretty significant snaps.
Enough.
So again, it's somewhat an arbitrary title calling one the starter, because I do think both of them are going to get a good number of snaps.
I suppose it's not impossible over the course of the next 2 weeks that Newbin could somehow seize the job from him. I suppose that's not impossible.
Newbin's played well, too.
He has. Again, there's no question about that.
All 3 of the safeties have played well.
And Newbin is going to be a terrific... Look, here's the bottom line. Bowen's going to get all 3 of them on the field at some point.
For sure.
There's no doubt about that. Yeah. So I think we're splitting hairs on this one, but I understand your point. I think it's well taken. And see, folks, I'm not going to pick on him today, okay? There's some young folks out there who get a little bit upset. Oh, you're picking on a young guy. Well, sometimes he deserves to be picked on. Other times he doesn't.
I can take it.
He doesn't deserve to be picked on today. I think that's a legitimate point. I do think, though, that unless Belton flubs the job, I'm going to go with the original statement, and we'll go with that. But, again, yeah, I get the point. All right. Now, if we know pretty much what the 22 is going to be, now we get to the backups on the depth chart, which is really where the bubble players lie and why this 4-quarter output on Saturday night against the Jets could really make a difference in some of these spots. And I'm going to throw out a couple of spots for you. And then we're going to get to your phone calls at 201-939-4513. Remember, if you don't catch this show live, it's available as part of our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcasts. I think some of the positions where the Giants are going to have to decide bubble players, and they may not necessarily be position player against player competitions. They could be position against position competitions. For example, how many running backs you're going to keep? How many tight ends you're going to keep? How many defensive tackles are you going to keep? How many offensive linemen you're going to keep? How many receivers you're going to keep? This may come down to position against position and not player against player.
Yeah, I mean, as Joe Shane has spoken about in the past, constructing the roster, especially now, getting it from 90 to 53, it's like putting pieces of a puzzle together or trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together. And, because there might be 4 of one position that you want to keep, but that obviously means that's one less of another position that you might have to keep. So there's a lot of work, obviously, that goes into getting this roster down to 53 players. It's not easy.
More colorful analogy. It's like the Rubik's Cube. You can get all the blues to line up in one row, and then you realize the rest of the cube is a mess.
Yep, exactly.
That doesn't work. Gotta redo it again. I could never do it, by the way.
No, me neither.
Okay, join the club.
We'll stick with talking about football.
Okay, good idea. 201-939-4513. All right. For you, which is the most intriguing bubble position as the Giants prepare for their preseason finale? Because remember, folks, again, Saturday's the game. Tuesday, 4 p.m., they got to make the decision on the 53.
So there's 2 for me that I guess kind of...
I'll let you have 1 and 1A. So go ahead.
Okay.
1 and 1A.
1, I guess, would be the defensive line.
Okay.
I mean, we spoke about Nacho starting next to Dexter, likely. But beyond him, I don't really know where Joe Shane's going to go. Like, I have a few guys that I think have a good chance at making the roster, or a chance at least, between Jordan Riley, DJ Davidson, Elijah Chapman obviously has been one of the big stories of camp. But none of those guys, the last month we were kind of hoping that some of those guys would really step up.
You were big on Jordan Phillips, and he got traded.
I know, I was. That was going into training camp, just because I thought, if this guy stays healthy, that could be the guy that starts next to Dexter, with Nacho coming in and a reserve sort of role, limited snaps. But I mean, as we saw, Phillips really did not stand out at all the first couple weeks of camp, and the Giants clearly didn't think that he was going to make that final 53, and decided, instead of just cutting him, to get potentially some draft capital back. So
I'm going to make this easier for you. Instead of deciding whether they're going to keep 4 or 5 defensive tackles,
that's like the big question.
Let's put that question aside, because again, that could depend on needs at other positions. So let me ask you this then. Who are the 2 players that you think it would come down to? The final spot, whether it's 4 or 5. If I say to you, give me the 2 players that you think you're going to have to weigh for that final spot, who do you think they're going to be? I know who my 2 guys would be.
I guess, I know Chapman has been the story of camp, one of the big stories of camp. I think he is still on the bubble. I wouldn't say that he's like solidified on the roster, despite his strong play. It's just with his size, like, he basically is going to be in passing down situations, is not going to contribute much in the run game. I would think it's between him and then, honestly, there might be a cop out, but a coin flip between Riley and Davidson. I think Davidson
I asked
has.
you for 2 guys. You got to give me 3.
So I'm going to say Chapman and Riley, even though I love Jordan Riley, and I think he still has the tools to develop into a solid defensive tackle. And despite DJ Davidson having a couple of hiccups in the game against the Texans, I think Davidson has flashed a little bit more than Riley this summer. So I'm going to say Chapman and Riley are who the decision might come down to.
This is going to be fun for you folks, because I have it totally different.
Really?
I've got it between Horn and Davidson.
Really?
I certainly do.
All right.
Yeah. I think that my fear that Chapman gets claimed after all the attention that he's gotten and what he's put on tape, there's nobody in America, and certainly in the National Football League, that did not see his play against the Texans when he ran 45 yards downfield and tracked down a running back. He's not a secret. There's no way that he's going to be a secret and that you can suddenly turn off the lights and sneak him through waivers onto the practice squad.
That's fair. But I guess my only counterpoint would be, every team in the NFL had a chance to sign him. He didn't go drafted. He didn't even get signed as an undrafted free agent. He got invited to a couple of rookie minicamps.
All it takes is one team to say, we admit
true.
that we made a mistake. That's all it takes.
Look, I'm rooting for Chapman. He's been great the last couple of weeks. And I think his play has earned him a spot. It's just the fact that he's listed at 6 feet. That's just, pretty small for a defensive tackle that you can only use basically on passing downs.
He admits to 5'11", by the way.
Oh, well, I remember that, but I just didn't want to call him out.
He admits to
on
it.
Giants.com, we have him listed at 6 feet. So.
That's okay.
And he's not going to really be able to contribute like on field goal blocks. So it's just you're taking a roster spot on a guy that is only going to be used in specific situations. That is the only reason why I think there's a chance he does not make it. I do think his play has earned him a spot on an NFL roster. I agree with you. If he gets cut, I do think someone else will claim him.
Yeah. Here's what I'll give you, though. If he is defensive tackle number 4 or number 5, the truth is he doesn't have to play a ton of snaps anyway. So if you want to tell me that he's simply a limited sub-package rotational player, what's that, 15 snaps maybe at most? And if he's going to be DT4 or DT5, you wouldn't get more than that anyway.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to how many at that position that they keep on the final roster. If it's 5, then I think he has a much better chance at making it. If it's only 4, you kind of expect those guys in a reserve role to contribute on special teams as well. And I don't know how much of that he can do. We haven't really seen him do that much. I don't think he's been lining up on like field goal blocks.
No.
So that's my only hesitation.
All right. Now, I'll give you my position. And I'm with you. I think the defensive line is fascinating right now. I'm looking at the wide receivers.
That was my 1A or 1B.
Yeah, I'm looking at wide receivers.
The bottom of the...
Yeah, because we know who the 4 are, and we've been discussing this now for months. Ever since the Giants drafted Neighbors, we've been talking about, are they going to keep 6? I think they have to keep 6. This is going to be a offensive attack that I know Brian Daboll is going to want to throw the ball some more. I believe that. In his heart of hearts, I think he's going to want to do that. And especially when they don't have Saquon Barkley as the bell cow running back anymore, they need to be more explosive and they need to do more things in the passing game. And that's why they built the offensive line to be better. So if you're going to keep 6, I think 7, the only way you wind up with 7 is if you count the 7th guy as a special teams player. And Olszewski right now, with the groin injury, the estimation that's been reported is 2 to 4 weeks. That's not good for him because McKenzie right now, who is a favorite, former Buffalo Bill, favorite of the coaching staff, he's taken all the returns. He had that muff against Detroit in the rain, but he took all the returns last week. He's been doing it in practice. I'd say McKenzie has done nothing to blow the job.
And he has more experience in his career as a receiver than Gunner does.
However, I will say this. To me, if you keep that extra receiver, you're keeping him really as a special teams guy, not as a receiver. So I actually wouldn't value that very much. I would rather keep Olszewski myself, but his injury makes this thing cloudy.
No, definitely primarily that guy's responsibilities are going to be your return guy.
It'll be 90% of his job.
But he's also going to be, sort of like that emergency wide receiver.
If necessary.
Yeah.
I think the Giants, though, have such a belief in their running backs as part of the pass game and also their tight ends as part of the pass game. Daboll has already told us many times he loves the multiple usage of the tight ends and the ability specifically that he says Johnson and Bellinger have to stand up in the slot, not as inline tight ends. He talks about that a lot. So I think if they really needed to go deep into their receiving core because somebody got hurt, they might just stick a tight end as a stand-up and run him out as a receiver.
But let's say, if Wan'Dale were to get hurt in a game, you're not going to run your tight ends out in the slot every play. You need to.
Oh, no.
You need to have someone that, kind of speedy guy.
My suspicion is they would put Hyatt in the slot because that's where he was at Tennessee. And then you'd have outside Neighbors and Slayton.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a reach.
All right.
So I'm going to say this. For me, the receiver spot comes down to two places because I think Olszewski's kind of weeded himself out of the special teams for the moment. Hopefully, they'll figure out a way to make that situation work. I got to keep Allen Robinson over Isaiah Hodgins. If it comes down to one of those 2 guys for the last spot, I'm going to go Robinson, who I think has had a better camp. The last week and a half in particular, he's catching everything that's his way. He's making a lot of nice grabs along the sideline, which we all know veteran savvy is very important to make those sideline grabs. And I value his professionalism, his tenure in the league, his resume. Not that Isaiah Hodgins is not a great guy and a really terrific pro, but Robinson, when he walks into that room, every single one of those younger receivers, including Darius Slayton, who's not a young pup, but is still on the younger side, they all look at him and they realize this guy's got pelts on his belt. He is legit. He walks in the room and they all know he's the grandpappy and knows what he's doing. And I think that is a tremendous influence in addition to what he could do on the field for Neighbors and for Hyatt.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen what he can do on the field
and it's
this
good.
Summer.
It's
good.
good.
It's not like there's no gas left in the tank. He can still play wide receiver. But I agree with you. I do think it is what he brings off the field in the meeting room, just on the sideline, is even more valuable than his on-field production. Because, I mean, as you mentioned, Darius Slayton and I guess McKenzie, if he makes the team, those would be the two veterans of the wide receiver room.
Yeah.
And, I mean, McKenzie, again, he has some experience at wide receiver, but it's not like he's been an every down wide receiver throughout his whole career.
Robinson has 3,000-yard seasons.
I know. Robinson
That's legit.
He's had a lot of success in the NFL. A lot. And I agree with you completely that I do think having him on the roster would go a long way in just helping Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, even Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale's only in his third year. Hasn't had a full season. So I do think having Allen Robinson in that room would go a long way in helping, especially those three, each of them take the next step in their respective games. The only, I guess, hesitation I have is then all 6 wide receivers that make the roster, none of them are contributing on special teams. And that is where I hesitate. And that is why. But I agree with you that I do think Allen Robinson should be on the final 53-man roster. I think he's earned it, and all the reasons we just spoke about. But that is why I think there's a chance that they could keep 7 wide receivers. And there's one guy in particular that I think has earned that 7th spot, and it hasn't really been because of his wide receiver play. But Miles Boykin has been, I think he's going to end up being, if he makes the team, like the Cam Brown of the special teams unit. And Cam Brown was excellent on special teams for the Giants the last couple of years. He now is with the Miami Dolphins. Carter Coughlin's also played special, the gunner position, kickoff coverage, punt coverage. From what I've seen from Boykin, he's played, I think, almost all of the special team snaps in coverage at least, and he's played well. I mean, he's looked really good as a gunner. And I know that sometimes is like an overlooked position, but let's not forget, David Tyree made his NFL career before the helmet catch. He was an amazing gunner for the Giants.
Michael Thomas was a Pro Bowler here on special teams. Renee Thompson, going back to the Bill Parcells era, was a Pro Bowler on special teams. Don't ever underestimate the value of those guys. And Boykin, when he came from Pittsburgh, that's why he was signed, because he is an outstanding special teams player. And I don't discount that value at all. And I agree with you. If you have the luxury and the room to keep him, you want to keep him. Yeah. I don't know if they have that. And I do think that there are
it's going to be tough.
Handful of other special teams guys here, like McLeod, like Coughlin, potentially Muasau. And I think he has a chance to stick now because the linebackers are hurt. Beavers, if he somehow sneaks on, is another guy who would play special teams. We've seen Darnay Holmes last year become a terrific special teams player as a gunner in the second half of the season. So I think they've got some other guys there who could fill that role, maybe not as great as Boykin can because he really is good at it. There's no doubt about that. I understand your point. I don't know if it's enough to keep him because I don't see him providing value to the receiver room at all.
Well, the only issue I have with what the guys you just said is the defensive players is some of those guys you named, they could be looking at key roles on the Giants defense. I mean, Nick McLeod could be the CB2.
Well,
and if
that's why they're in the market for a corner because I don't think they want McLeod to be burned up just doing one thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you spoke about how, banged up the linebacker group is right now. I mean, Carter Coughlin could be looking at decent amount of defensive snaps come week 1. unless those guys get back, which obviously we're hoping they do. We haven't really.
I know.
We're in preseason mode, so we
Michael
still don't
McFadden get healthy.
We don't really have an actual timeline from Dable about these guys. So
I know
those guys that you mentioned. My only concern is that they could be looking at significant playing time on defense, and if that's the case, do you also want some guys that are significant contributors on defense then also lining up as your gunners?
See, folks,
coverage?
This is why these bubble decisions are incredibly difficult. These are all valid points. Everything that we've talked about holds some water. The question is, when you put that water on the scale, how's it going to balance out? Which way is going to win? And that is a huge headache. The Giants are a better team. They're a better team.
Yeah.
There's more talent out there on this 90 than there's been in several years. So
Definitely.
This 53 is now a real headache. That's good.
That's a good problem to have.
It is. It's a good problem because we both agreed DeVito has to be here, right? They're keeping 3.
I think so.
We agree with that.
Especially with Drew Lock not at 100% clearly. Even if he was, it would be tough for them to cut Tommy DeVito. I think he's shown enough where another team would easily take him if the Giants were to cut him.
One of the positions that's not a battle of player against player is running back. Okay? We know who the 4 running backs would be, I believe, if they kept 4.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's a numbers battle right there. That is, are they keeping 3 or are they keeping 4? I don't think there's any debate who the 4 guys are, right? We would totally agree that behind Singletary, it's Tracy and it's Gray and it's Miller.
Yep.
And there's no debate as to who 4 is. The problem there is strictly numbers. That's why that's different than what we were just talking about in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, definitely.
201-939-4513 is our phone number. Let's go to the phones. And, of course, my document just disappeared off my screen. Pearson, call it out.
Yep, we're going to Chase in Indiana.
There you go. Chase, what's going on?
Hey, Matt. Hey, Paul. How's it going?
Hi.
What's up, Chase?
I just had a question about Malik Neighbors. So we're expecting this kid to be, otherworldly. Some say the next Odell Beckham. Might be a little far-fetched, but for a rookie. But I just had a question because we keep seeing Malik have drop issues, like in practice. We're lucky that it's in practice, but I was just wondering if you guys think that's a problem going forward, or is that something that is just like rookie jitters?
All right, I want you to identify drop. Okay? When I keep my own personal stats, I identify a drop as a pass that should have been easily caught by any professional who has the ball touch both of his hands. If the guy has to make an acrobatic catch in any way, that doesn't go down as an automatic drop because now he has performed above and beyond to try to make a super catch or a spectacular catch. So Neighbors, while he has allowed a few passes to hit the ground during training camp, more than half of those 4 or 5 would have been super catches. They would have been above the standard of a catch. He thinks he should make every catch that he gets a hand on.
Which is a great mentality for a wide receiver to have.
It's awesome.
You want
It's
your
awesome.
receivers to think like that.
So he quantifies every one of those as a drop. But the truth is, it's because his standard is so high that people are already jumping on him when he doesn't make that terrific eye-opening catch. So I want to grade his, quote, drops on a curve a little bit. I think you need to pump your brakes just a tad before you start calling him having the dropsies.
But I will say, Chase, just to answer your question, no, I don't think it is a problem. It is
No, it is not.
We're
In
not
short.
even at week 1 of his rookie season. And I know this seems like so long ago. It was five years ago, but when Darius Slayton was drafted, granted, different situation, he was a 5th-round pick. He came in that rookie minicamp, he had a lot of drop passes. So much so that that was the main storyline coming out of that rookie minicamp, that this 5th-round pick couldn't hold on to the football.
He was juggling hand grenades.
Yeah, and since that rookie minicamp 5 years ago, drops have not been an issue at all for Darius Slay, and he's become the most consistent receiver on this team. So if we get into the regular season and Malik Neighbors starts dropping balls in actual games on a somewhat consistent basis, then I think it's fair to bring this topic back up. But right now, I don't think it is a cause of concern at all. He's caught almost every pass thrown his way, and it seems like, the handful of drops that he's had seem to just catch the attention of the people who are reporting on practice. But that's
because he's raised the bar. That's why.
Yeah.
He's so good. He's so talented. We think he should catch everything as he does.
Yeah. But so, no, I don't think the handful of balls that he has dropped in the last month, I don't think it is a cause of concern.
What else you got?
Okay. I had one more. So Deonte Banks, so during the Jets practice, I was reading that he was getting torched a little bit. Was that usually in practice, he's right there with Malik Neighbors, an inch away. Is that because he's not processing the routes that the receivers are getting fast or that they're running fast enough? Or is that another issue?
Well, Tay Banks, part of what we saw yesterday, and I did not put a stopwatch on all the Jets' offensive plays, but even talking to Dexter Lawrence today after practice, there were a number of plays that they had a lot more time in the pocket because they weren't blowing it dead for sacks. And then with the elongated time, Rodgers would throw a dart and it would be complete. And it would, in some cases, for a touchdown. Now, in a real game, chances are Rodgers is as flat as a pancake. Okay, and that pass never gets off. And so the defensive backs don't have to hold on to their receiver for 6 seconds. So I think you need to take that into context too. Not to say that Tay Banks had a great day, because he did not. Okay, let me make that clear. He did scuffle some yesterday, and I'm sure that there are completions that he would love to have back. But I also think that the appearance of what happened yesterday might have been a little bit overplayed because there were no live sacks going on in the Jets' backfield.
Yeah, and I'll just add 2 things. One, I saw, those same reports from some of the reporters that were at the practice, and all I can say is that I watched every single rep, and again, as Paul just said, it certainly wasn't the best practice for Deonte Banks, but some people were attributing him as to being in coverage on plays that he just wasn't the cornerback in coverage.
Yeah, there were some zones too.
It wasn't him that was getting beat by the Jets receiver, and yet after practice, some reporters were saying that it was him on certain plays. So just want to point that out, first of all. Second of all, some of the plays that the Jets offense made were just plays that you just have to tip your hat to a future Hall of Fame quarterback who's one of the best to ever play. That was the first time I had ever seen Aaron Rodgers throw the ball up close and personal. And I think it was the most beautiful thrown passes I've ever seen in my life.
In short, he was surgical.
He is surgical with the pass. He is the most accurate, pinpoint accuracy quarterback I have ever seen. And so some of those big plays, granted, they counted the box score as touchdowns no matter how you get them, but some of them were just because of how much of an amazing quarterback and passer Aaron Rodgers is. It wasn't because of bad coverage.
All right, Chase, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, guys.
201-939-4513. Get a hold of some highlights of Troy Aikman. Trust me.
Yep.
Troy Aikman was the most accurate, tightrope, laser-type passer, especially between 15 and 20 yards, that I've ever seen. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. 201-939-4513. James in Georgia, you're next on the program. Hello.
What's going on, Paul and Matt?
Hi.
Hey, James.
I kind of ran right down what I was going to talk about, or what I called to when I heard the topic. I was actually getting in my car off of work. Luckily, I moved the time back today. I think a week or two ago, I spoke with John and Matt about the good problem we're having, or sort of having, whatnot. And then they went and cut or traded old boy to Dallas. What was his name?
Jordan Phillips.
Yeah. And then Ryder Anderson got hurt, which that's two guys who would have been in that conversation for defensive tackle that are no longer there.
Yep.
So my premise when I called last was, who do we have on the roster where like the 3 and 4 guy are so close that we might trade the number 3 guy and keep the 4 guy? But now it's like we traded away number 5 because he wasn't really doing anything. You know what I mean? And we got something back for him rather than just let him go, which was another part of my premise. Like, will teams just wait it out and see who you're going to cut anyway? I guess it was good on the office, the front staff to get something for Phillips. But going with what y'all was speaking on the wide receivers and knowing Dayball's offense, this kind of a spiderweb question. Like I was saying, everything is connected. A couple-parter. Do you see Bryce Ford Wheaton anywhere in y'all's mix? Because I know y'all just went through the wide receivers. Are y'all stuck on we're keeping 6, and with Dayball's offense being the way it is, like how he likes to pass more, do you think we really do sacrifice another position to keep maybe a 7th wide receiver, knowing that we're going to be running so many and a guy might get hurt? So you might keep a 7th or an 8th wide receiver, knowing that's a heavily used position, as opposed to the running back where you won't run the ball as much. Do you see them doing something like that? And if you can answer about Bryce Ford Wheaton, because it sounds like I don't know if I missed his name a second ago, but it sounds like he's on the outs.
We didn't mention him. I think he's practice squad material. He's had a quiet camp, and I think that's very disappointing to me because I loved him last summer, and then he got hurt, and he rehabbed like can't believe how hard he rehabbed. And I think they'd like to keep him in the building. I really do. But I don't see how he makes the 53.
Yeah, I mean the thing to keep in mind, the thing to keep in mind with him is, he's a year removed from a torn ACL, and that first year back, like it's great that he's was cleared for day 1 of training camp, has been on the field every day, but they always say that you don't really get your true like explosiveness back and the same agility and speed that you had prior to the injury until year 2 of the recovery. So I agree with Paul that I think they would love to keep him in the building. Like I feel like he would be a prime practice squad stash candidate, and then maybe later in the year as he's further removed from that injury, just like we saw with Wan'Dale Robinson last year, he gets some of that burst and explosiveness back, and then maybe he gets brought up for a game and shows what he can do there, and then earn that spot on the roster. But as of right now, we've seen more from the other wide receivers where right now my guess is he would be on the outside looking in.
And by the way, never miss out on a chance to say something great about Daniel Jones. That's what's so amazing about him. He is running around like a thoroughbred racehorse 9 months after a torn ACL. It doesn't seem like that whole year thing applies to him at all.
No, he seems to be. Well, I would say it is a little bit different.
He's a
with
quarterback.
Quarterbacks who don't necessarily rely on their speed as much as receivers.
Have you
running
seen
backs.
him take it off, though?
He looks like normal Daniel Jones running the ball. That's for sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's good. My last one was going to be kind of tied in. Like, do you think they would keep a Bryce Ford Wheaton for his body type when making up the receiver room rather than just go with 6 Smurfs?
Allen Robinson is a taller receiver who has length.
True.
So if he makes it, that takes care of that part of the checklist.
That's still one guy. Yeah. All right, guys. I don't have any problems with all the interceptions and crazy non-game planning we had last preseason game. It's preseason. Yeah, you want to see him make a better decision as our, veteran quarterback. And yeah, C.J. Stroud is backed up in the end zone, and he didn't throw a pick 6. But tomato, when they actually get to practice him for an opponent, Daniel Jones will show up or he won't, and then we can talk about tangible things that we can grade him on. You can grade on preseason, but then you're just spinning your wheels because it doesn't count anyway.
Thank you so much for the call. Tomato, he's talking my language, huh? Thank you, my man. Thank you.
And just to the first original point you brought up, bringing up Jordan Phillips, Ryder Anderson, defensive tackle position, Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, spoke earlier in the week and said that the Giants are going to be aggressive when it comes to waiver wire requests next week. Unlike last year, where the playoff run led to the Giants being, I think it was 24th.
They picked 6
on the waiver wire order. They are now the 6th team in the waiver wire order. I believe that's where they were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's when they picked up Nick McLeod, Jason Pinnock, and I forgot who the last guy was, one other player, who are, I believe, all 3 still on the team. Obviously, those 2 are. The third player I'm blanking on, but I believe it's someone that's still on the team now as well. Maybe Cager? Or was he... Regardless.
No, he was a free agent.
Yeah. Regardless, though, Brandon Brown said that they are going to be aggressive in filling out, looking towards the waiver wire to fill out the end of the roster. So, we're talking about defensive line. We've talked about, linebacker due to the injuries, cornerback. Like, as of right now, again, we don't know exactly how long some of these injured guys are going to be out for. Those are the types of positions that I think they are going to have a particularly keen eye on next week when it comes to cutdown day, to put in some of those waiver wire requests and try to fill in the back end of the roster using guys like that. And as we saw 2 years ago, that is a good way to find very solid football players. I mean, no one would think that Jason Pinnock hasn't done a lot for this team the last couple of years, especially last year. He's now penciled in as one of the starting safeties. So that is another way to find talented players, even though, you might think just because a guy got cut from another team, oh, he can't be that good. But, I mean, the Giants have literally already shown with this regime that that's definitely not the case. And that is a way to fill out the end of the roster.
No doubt. Quickly, Run or Walk with Giants legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K race and kids run presented by Quest on Saturday, September 7th at 9 a.m. at MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants receive a commemorative T-shirt. Afterwards, there's a post-race festival and appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. Now, how about the Giants Fan Fest? That's on Friday, September 6th, presented by Wendy's at MetLife Stadium. Doors open at 5 p.m., celebrating 100 years of Giants football. We'll have a ceremony honoring the top 100 Giants of all time, autographs, panel discussions by Giants legends, historic displays, photos with the Lombardi trophies, and an incredible drone light and fireworks show to end the night. Get your tickets now by visiting giants.com/fanfest. The Giants Huddle podcast has Giants and NFL luminaries, long-form interviews, get all kinds of good stuff. You can subscribe to that on giants.com/podcasts or your favorite podcast platform.
Your interview with Gary Reasons was up today.
One of the Giants 100, Gary Reasons, part of the Parcells crew that won 2 Super Bowls. Giants season ticket membership is available for the 2024 season. Opening day, it's only a few weeks away. September 8th, Minnesota Vikings.
2 weeks from Sunday.
You can stay connected to the club all year round. Memberships are available for the season. To learn more about exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And Giants TV is the free streaming video app. It's available on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. 201-939-4513 is our phone number. We go back to the phones. Cliff in New York, you're next on the show. Hello.
Hey, guys. Thanks for the great show. Is the guy you were just trying to think of, the third waiver, Moreau?
He was a free agent.
I know Brandon Brown said that in his press conference on Tuesday, but I remember that signing because I loved it at the time. He was a free agent signing to the practice squad that eventually got elevated to the active roster.
Let me go back and see if I could find that for you. Go ahead.
I can find it as you ask your question.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, I appreciate the rundown on the talent. I like the way you summarized it on the end. We've really come a long way on talent. To me, there's 2 separate things going on. They're not really separate. There's the development of the roster from a talent perspective, and there's the development of the team from a perspective of leadership and these subtle things that I've never pretended to understand, as well as the people that are actually part of the building. And I have a question about that. But just on the talent, I think the place that I've noticed it the most is the interior DL, because it was very telling when you 2 guys were trying to pick 2 guys, you came up with 2 different guys. That's it. That's where the improvement is, even though we lost a couple of them.
Time out. Tyree Phillips. I just found him here. Claimed on August 27th. He was claimed on October 27th, 2022.
That was before cutdown day. So I did find it. I was wrong. It was Nick McLeod, Jason Pinnock, Justin Lane, a DB, and Jack Anderson. Those are the 4 guys Giants claimed after cutdown day.
2 of those guys stuck and became something.
Yeah.
The other 2 guys didn't. So, yeah, on the 27th, they made a whole bunch of moves, and one of the claims was Phillips. But, okay, different date? Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. The point still remains. Look at those guys did contribute, all of them.
Yeah, Phillips gave them something until he got hurt again.
Yeah.
Sure. That's the change with Joe Schoen. Building on what he took over, he had some building blocks. He immediately made some big moves with no money, and then when he started having a little more money, look, it's really coming along. Just after the draft, I was thinking that the talent part might be, might have finally turned the corner. And from everything I've seen since the draft is making me think we have turned the corner on the talent, and especially in the DL, because even in the dark days of last year when Leonard Williams was playing at an all-pro level next to Dexter, they gave me a very special feeling because I had it before going way back when we really had an awesome defense, and it was because we were exceptionally strong in the middle. So the question is, with those extra guys besides the starters, they're not the same guy to replace Dexter when he needs a blow or Nacho. It's 2 different guys, right?
Well, I think what you got to remember, that Dexter's a nose tackle, and the guy next to him is the 3 technique. They are technically different positions. They're not just defensive tackles.
Yeah.
Right? So, to me, Jordan Riley fits the Dexter Lawrence nose tackle spot better than the 3 technique. Yeah. Chapman is a 3 technique.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. So I'm glad in a way that you brought this up, because it's not just simple enough to say, oh, they're keeping how many defensive tackles. No, they got to be careful. They got to make sure they keep 3 technique, and they also keep nose. You can't just keep all nose tackles. You got to make sure you got something of each.
Well, they showed something to me in the first preseason game. I wasn't watching live. I was watching on Gamecast. I don't know if you're familiar with that on ESPN. You just see a simulation and you see what the plays are and who made and you see how many yards the Lions were not gaining on the ground.
They run Gamecast with the X's and O's and the charts in preseason games?
It's not really X's not fully X and O's. It's just like a little thing. It says Daniel Jones 8-yard pass to Darius Slayton.
Right.
2nd and 2.
Oh, all right. So it's just a written play-by-play. They're not going with the diagrams, are they?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got that.
The only diagram,
smokes.
the only diagram is where you are on the field, and it's when you get caught like I do often, where you just can't get a telecast. Anyway, I was very impressed with that. And there's some serious depth there. Whoever they end up with backing up Dexter and Nacho is going to be very, very interesting. And I don't want to get carried away, but maybe some of the guys that don't quite make the 53 there are the ones that they can hide on the practice squad and give them a shot during the season. I think there's some room for that position to develop during the season. And but then the next week against Houston, what I noticed was where we are with overall depth, and that I felt that early in the game, and then it really came on stronger towards the end. So that's where this waiver stuff that you've been talking about maybe comes in, because we can catch up there too. But I thought Houston showed that they were ahead of us, like they should have been if they advanced in the playoffs last year, like they did, and they're in the AFC, and we held our own against the Lions this year. Compared to what we did last year in the preseason, and even though it was the joint practices that showed more than the game did, I was really feeling good about where we were. But then I saw, okay, pump the brakes a little bit, because the overall depth isn't quite there, and Joe Schoen knows that. I'm sure he knows it's an ongoing process, no matter how you feel about it, and I'm really feeling good about that. But watching the top 30 with listening to Justin Tuck, I'm reminded when it came to the DL in 11, they played different positions, and I think things have changed so much, so the comparison isn't too close to be concerned about. But the leadership part was where he got me. He emphasized the leadership part, and so did George Martin sitting there with him. That's always been a big deal. When we won in my fandom, it was never because we were lighting up the league with the most talent at every position. We had something else going on that was very special, especially the last 2 Super Bowls. And I mean, who thought that we were going to win those? You know, I did, but and the team did, and that's what counted the most. And the coaches knew it. But do we have any clue who might be emerging in leadership yet?
So I'll take this one, just because I've noticed this recently. You know, as we're talking about the defensive line group, there are 2 guys in that room that, not saying that like they're definitely getting voted team captains or anything like that.
One guy's very large.
But 2 guys that have been all summer very vocal, and, you know, especially the last, you know, week or so, I noticed this. Dexter Lawrence, which is, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, you know, after yesterday's practice, which we've spoken about, you know, overall wasn't the greatest practice from the Giants. Dexter was one of the main guys getting everyone, as soon as practice was over, to huddle together and, you know, regroup. And I didn't.
That's called the call up.
Yeah.
Dexter did
and
the call
was being
up.
very, very vocal. And then the other guy is the guy that we've been talking about that could be starting right next to him, Nacho. Nacho, I've noticed all summer, has really stepped up and has become one of the most vocal guys on this entire roster. And, you know, he's not the most talented guy on the team. He's not the star of the team, but I think he's going to play a big role in the leadership department this season.
Yeah, it's been very noticeable how much more vocal he's been. I agree with that.
Maybe he got PO'd at hearing all of us talking about we need more of the 3 technique.
Well,
maybe he heard that.
And then just one guy on offense who has never been a vocal guy, but the few times he's spoken to the media, he's spoken about taking that next step in terms of his leadership ability, is Andrew Thomas. I mean, he's obviously one of the anchors of this team, one of the most important pieces of this entire team, and one of the most talented players. And, you know, we've spoken a lot on this show about how the offensive line has improved because of, you know, the additions they brought in, Carmen Brasillo, James Ferentz, the coaches. I think Andrew Thomas has played a big role in that too. He seems to be the guy that is constantly getting the O-line group together during practice. And yeah, I mean, again, he's not the most vocal guy on the team in general. He's outspoken about that when he talks to the media, but it does seem like he's trying and so far succeeding in becoming more of a leader for this team and in the locker room.
He's quiet, but he's very large. And my best advice is, when he speaks, listen.
And you can see that when he does speak, everybody listens.
Cliff, we got to run. Thanks for the call. 201-939-4513. Brandon is on line 1. You're next on BBKL. Hello.
Hello. I had 2 points, but I see it's about the end of the show, so I'll make it 1 and I'll call you. I'll call back.
We got a couple of minutes. Go ahead. Try to get through them quickly.
All right. So the one is really more what I'm calling for, and that's this. I don't do revisionist history, so I like to look at things in real time, and then I feel like the decision-making real time is the decision-making that you have to use as far as when you go back in time. And
100%. Before you even go further, thank you. You're a realist, and I appreciate that perspective.
Absolutely. So we're in real time, and I see real-time issues. For the most part, I love what Joe Schoen has done with the team. I love the youth. I love whoever's in pro personnel, bringing in these undrafted free agents. Whoever that person is doing a bang-up job at their job. And I'm liking everything about that for the front office so far. But I see that Joe Schoen tends to have a blind spot, or at least he's developing a little bit of like a pattern, if you will. So last year, going into the season, we all could have looked at the roster and said, what's your biggest hole in all season? And it would have been real simple, offensive line. Mark Lewinsky was penciled in as a starter starting that season. And I talked to John, and it was like, we still have time. Plus, there's other guys on rosters, and we can look at that, and we'll get to that point, and maybe they'll bring somebody in. And then we started week 1, Mark Lewinsky as a starter, and we know how that turned out. Lugman, no hands was out there blocking, right? So that was 1 year, and you let it go. All right, so then we're going to fast forward to this year. Earlier this year, HBO put out a documentary, right? And in that documentary, when is the Combine? What month is that? March? April?
Very end of February, beginning of March.
Right.
Even worse. Okay. So in the documentary at the Combine, they all sitting in the stands.
Yeah.
Joe Shane comes up to him and says, we could get Christian Wilkins or Brian Burns, but I might have to play corner. All right. Well, now we're in training camp, and I hope he's got his cleats because that's not going to look good in the long run. In the long run, if you look at this team and say, what's your biggest need right now going into the season? With cap much, you can't say we're up against a cap. You got all the resources you need to fix all the holes, or majority of them, maybe not depth at certain positions, but you should be able to fix it with what you currently have. And I think we would all look at this roster and say our biggest need is either linebacker depth and corner. But you can't be on HBO in February laughing about it if that ends up being the reason this team is real bad this year.
Well, let me just say this to you. The Giants did have a few significant holes to deal with after last season. And it's really, unless lightning, hits in a very unique spot and you catch it in a bottle, to suggest that you're going to be able to fill all of them in one off season is asking an awful lot. I mean, again, you can catch lightning in a bottle. Sometimes it can happen, but that is not the norm. And it's unrealistic to expect, especially with the cap room that they had left, that they would be able to do it. And so they made the decision that between fortifying and making a big commitment to the corner, that they were going to rather make the big commitment to the pass rusher. Both of them are equally important to this defense. They were not going to be able to plug both holes at the level that you wanted them to. So you got to pick one. So you may be unhappy about the corner spot, but I guarantee you, if they had taken a corner and invested big-time resources in a corner, you'd be calling us up today saying, where's the other pass rusher? Because Thibodeau can't do it by himself.
Real quick, Paul, what I will say is I'm not mad at the Brian Burns thing. I'm just saying that we can't in the future go back in time and say, well, that was unforeseen, because in February,
you're right.
GM is laughing about it.
No, but you're right. It's not unforeseen. They knew they were going to have to make a choice. They had a fork in the road, and they decided that more of the resources were going to go to the pass rusher. Remember, Joe Shane asked Shane Bowen, you said you saw the show. I'm going to second me on this. You said you saw the show. Shane asked Dable about Burns, and he asked Bowen about Burns and said, what do you think about Brian Burns? Shane Bowen's like, oh, really? How you get him? So this was a collaboration.
Not only that, but if you look back at last year, I don't think anyone would deny that the offensive line was the biggest weakness on the entire roster. And clearly they allocated a lot of resources in free agency towards the offensive line. So far, the early results are showing that it is paying off, because the offensive line looks significantly better than it did last year.
Right.
First of all. Second of all, the clip that Paul's referring to, he not only asked Shane Bowen, but he said to Shane Bowen, if we get Burns, that's going to be the only real addition to the defense that you're going to get this offseason. Are you okay with that? And Shane Bowen said, yes, 100% yes. And that is the guy that is leading your defense, creating the defense. You're going to lean on what that guy tells you when you're making your personnel decisions. And my third point is, if you look at since the day that Joe Shane arrived here, you can't say that the Giants haven't tried or haven't went out and spent assets on the cornerback position. In his 3 drafts, Joe Shane has spent a 3rd-round pick in Cordell Flott, a 1st-round pick on Deonte Banks, and a 3rd-round pick on Drew Phillips. Flott is the oldest of the group. He's going into year 3. You have to give the guy a chance to develop. It's year 3 is when everyone says a guy, you can tell if it's the make or break year, if the guy has it in the NFL or not, whether he's going to make it. And unfortunately, Flott has been banged up the last couple of weeks, and that's sort of hindered his development as we head into year 3. But you can't say that Joe Shane hasn't put resources towards trying to address the cornerback position, because he has.
I'm not saying for the overall, since he's been here, he has neglected the position. I'm strictly, I want to flash you back quickly to 2017, I think it was Daniel Jones, going into Daniel Jones' second year. We spent the whole offseason knowing that team coming up, not going to be good, okay? And the most that we were asking from that team was just look competitive. That was all we were asking from that team. But that was the plan in the offseason. You guys know what happened when the live bullets started flying? People got fired for that decision.
All right, well let me ask you this before we go, because we're going to have to run, but I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to be able to respond. And think about this. Remember, you know, we've talked about you have to make a decision in real time. In real time, they knew they had this fork in the road, and they were going to be able to deal with one of these defensive holes, as we've just described to you. We've already gone through all that. But here's what I would say to you. What were your alternatives? If you neglected to get the premier pass rusher, then Azeez Ojulari, who has had an up and down start to his career, including a lot of injuries, was going to be your pass rush 2. Okay? If you decided to invest heavily in the corner, Ojulari was going to be your pass rush 2. And him in combination with Thibodeau during the last 2 years has not been nearly enough to make the Giants an impactful pass rush. Now, if you addressed the pass rush and went out and got a stud like Brian Burns, you now knew that, okay, you got Cordell Flott, who you didn't know was going to get hurt in August, right? You didn't know that, but you knew he was a high draft pick who had shown some potential, and you knew you had Nick McLeod, who's a steady, solid pro, right? You knew you had that. And while that was not going to be a stellar backfield, you had 2 candidates who, in your mind, you're thinking, look, as far as the overall picture, we might be able to stabilize the corner position a little bit easier than the pass rush spot. That's how I would present it to you. Now, do you want to tell me, would you have been more comfortable relying on Ojulari in the pass rush, or more comfortable with Flott and McLeod as the possible CB2?
What I'll say, Paul, is that I think that's not quite the
No, that is the picture. That is the picture.
Well,
that is the situation.
The reason I say it's not quite the picture is because this is not the Giants of old. Joe Shane has done a real good job with our cap situation. So it's not like we're not sitting on $18 million and we're still in training camp and we're not up against the cap with no way to fill up.
Oh, see, but no, hold on. You're now avoiding the question because in real time, at that moment, that's the situation they were looking at.
I'm talking about today.
We're going back in real time when the decision had to be made about making the deal for Brian Burns. They had to address this. Okay?
No,
and here's what I will say. We got to let you go, Brandon. I'm sorry. Call again another time. The other thing that I think the caller is missing here is that just because the Giants reportedly have $18 million in cap room right now, how do you know that they haven't made calls to some of the street free agents who are out there who have NFL resumes? How do you know they haven't made those calls? And how do you know that maybe some of those calls were basically, we don't want to sign there right now? Or maybe we're waiting another week. Or maybe we got somebody else in mind. Or maybe we haven't trained and we're not ready to come in. How do you know? You can't tell me that the Giants have ignored the spot. Because I'm telling you now, based on what Brandon Brown told us, they're actively looking, keeping their radar out. So how do you know they haven't made some phone calls and some inquiries?
We don't. And
that's what he's accusing them of. He's accusing the Giants of neglecting the spot.
Yeah, I heard him. I have just 3 quick things to say, and then I know we got to run. First of all, what he was saying about, the Giants are in a much better cap situation now. That is true. Undoubtedly, that is true. But Joe Shane has been very clear that while he obviously wants to put together a competitive team, a team that can try to win and make the playoffs this year, he is not going to sacrifice future cap space in order to just go for the win now decisions. I mean, we've seen GMs in the past do that, and it almost never works out. It almost always backfires. Mm-hmm. Joe Shane has been very clear that he wants to keep the Giants in a good cap space situation, not only this year, but in the future years. And, if the Giants went out and signed, let's say, Gilmore for the deal he just got from the Vikings, Yeah, they could have restructured some contracts to make it work, but now you're eating away cap space that they could have rolled over to next year and the year after that. So you don't just go for the stopgap win now decisions all the time.
You also don't know if Gilmore even was interested in coming here.
That was just an example I
used. But that's the other problem.
Yeah, so that was my first thing.
Everybody assumes you could just sign whoever you want. No, the other person's got to want to come here.
The second thing, when we talked about that conversation between Joe Schoen and Shane Bowen at the Combine about whether or not to trade for Burns, this isn't the same Giants defense that we've seen the last couple of years where over half the time the Giants were sending blitzes. Shane Bowen's defense relies on your front four hitting home. So that makes edge rusher probably the most important position on the defense. So trading for Brian Burns and having him and Kayvon Thibodeau along with Dexter Lawrence on the interior now gives the Giants, I think, one of the most talented pass rushing defensive lines in the entire NFL. And Shane Bowen's, the secondary, they play more zone now than we saw in the Giants defenses of the past. Not saying that means cornerback is not important, but it adds more importance towards your guys up front, getting pressure on the quarterback, which will ease the stress of your guys in the secondary.
That goes back to the point about Bowen's influence in the decision.
Yes. And my third final point is 2 years ago, we saw the Giants sign Fabian Moreau off of the street right before week 1, and he ended up starting most of the season
for a playoff team.
And prior to Adoree Jackson's injury, when Moreau was playing as the number 2 corner, he was fantastic. He was more than anyone in this building could have expected or hoped for. And not that I'm necessarily saying that's going to happen again, but there are cornerbacks currently on the street that if it becomes a dire situation, the Giants could call those guys and offer them the same thing they offered Moreau. Start as a veteran on the practice squad until you get your legs underneath you, and then we'll bring you up and you can compete to be that starting CB2. There are some big name guys that are still out there. And as Paul said, who's to say that Joe Schoen hasn't already made those calls and has something waiting in the wings? So I agree with you. I don't think it's fair at all to just say that the Giants have, neglected the CB2 spot and don't seem to have a plan for it. I don't think that's fair at all.
Rumor is Pearson runs a 4.25 in the 40. And if we don't get off this program right now and end it, he's going to use that speed to chase us down.
Right.
So we got to go, folks.
I'm done.
That's the end of Big Blue Kickoff Live for Thursday. Don't forget, you can catch this program as part of the archive, as part of the Giants platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcasts. For Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino, and remember, tomorrow's program on Friday will be airing live. We're going back to our lunchtime hour, 12:30 p.m. Giants simply have a walkthrough to prep for Saturday's game against the Jets. No late practice tomorrow, so we can come your way 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time live tomorrow. That's Friday afternoon here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. So long, everybody.